And council members.
They're in there doing their wheels.
All right, this is the work
funny.
session for February 8th, so we'll stand and do the pledge first. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we only have a couple items on our agenda today for today's work session. So our first is for AVZ, if you guys would like to come up. Bill, do you want to come up for this also? Morning. We do film this, so I'm just going to have you, when you sit down, just introduce yourselves.
Good morning, how are you? How are you? Thank you.
I think we're ready to start.
Good morning. My name is Jeff DeVoli. I'm the lead audit partner for the firm of Goldberg, Vigiano, and Zurich. Excuse me, the town auditors. I have with me today Renee Sumter, one of our managers, and Mike Cattell, our supervisor.
Welcome.
Thank
Morning.
you. Morning.
So I'll go through the presentation on the financial statements.
Yep.
I'll try and keep it as brief as possible.
As exciting as possible.
Yeah, we've been through this once with the supervisor last week and with the audit committee back in the fall when we completed our audit. So we conducted our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. Our opinion is based on the procedures we performed as well as a report of other auditors. The audit of the Riverhead IDA and LDC have separate audits, and we're referred to those auditors' opinions in our report. Also note that there is a community preservation fund that is also audited by a separate auditor. The financial statements have been prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles for governments. The opinion we rendered is an unmodified or clean opinion as to the accuracy of the amounts and disclosures on a material basis. The concept of materiality is, in an audit, is that what we are concerned about are things that would affect and influence a reader's conclusions about the net position or the results of operations, not insignificant items that we consider immaterial. It's also important to note that a clean opinion does not indicate financial or fiscal strength, but rather accuracy of the numbers and the disclosures in the financial statements. As I said, we have reviewed a draft of this report with the supervisor a couple weeks ago and the independent audit committee last fall. I'll just go through some financial highlights. On a government-wide basis,
I think I had the final report. You gave me the final.
Right,
Yes. Yeah, the final.
yes.
Okay.
On a government-wide basis, cash in the governmental activities totals $26 million at December 31st, 2016.
Is there a page for that one?
I see we're on 25?
25.
This is the government-wide financial statement. There's two sets of financial statements. Included in one financial statement here is the full accrual statement, and then there's the fund basis statements. So this is the government-wide basis. Cash in the government activities totals $26 million at December 31st, 2016, and $6.5 million in the business type activities, which is the sewer and the water funds. Total net position, which is the excess of total assets versus the total liabilities in the governmental activities column, is $82.4 million and $59.3 million in the business type activities. The governmental activities net position decreased by 2.9. That should be on the next page.
Yep, 26.
26 and 27?
Decreased by $2.9 million during 2016, and the business type activities increased their combined net position by $941,000.
I'll take it. Thanks. That's okay.
More meaningfully, on the fund level basis, which is on the pages that follow,
Starting on 28 and 29?
The general fund, which is the main operating fund of the town, cash was $4.9 million at 12/31/16, and fund balance amounted to $2.4 million, of which there was $449,000 of free fund balance, or available fund balance. That represents less than 1% of the general fund's expenditures and transfers out. During the year, the fund balance in the general fund increased by $209,000. One more page.
And you'll see on 32.
Sorry, next one.
Okay.
In the highway fund, fund balance was $3.3 million, an increase of $547,000 during the year. Capital Projects Fund had a fund balance of $853,000, an increase of $930,000 from a deficit position of $77,000 from the prior year. The increase in the Capital Project Fund came largely from a book transfer from the Park Reserve in 2016 as a reimbursement for money spent by the Capital Projects Funds in prior years. The restricted fund balance in the Community Preservation, the 2% fund, was $10.7 million. That decreased $2.2 million in 2016. In all, the non-major funds, which include the special grant, the special trust, the bid, dock, lighting, ambulance, refuse and garbage, parking, and CDA funds, have a combined fund balance of $1 million, a decrease of $1.3 million during 2016. The biggest driver of the $1.3 million decrease was the book transfer I just mentioned from the Park Reserve to the Capital Projects Fund. The sewer fund increased its net position by $273,000.
Okay, so we're gonna be on page 37 now?
Thank you for.
I know it backwards and
Yeah.
forwards.
The sewer fund increased, as I said, the net position by $273,000, and the water fund increased its net position by $668,000 during 2016. During 2016, the town repaid $8.7 million of the outstanding debt of $76.9 million of general obligation debt. 5.6 of the debt, excuse me, repaid was for the 2% property tax, the Community Preservation Fund account. There were no new bonds issued or sold during 2016 for the governmental funds. However, the sewer and the water funds issued $12.8 million in general obligation debt and repaid $1.3 million of the $20.6 million in outstanding debt.
And that can all be found on page 60 as part of one of the note disclosures if you want to look at that in a little bit more detail.
There was a 2016 net increase of $7.1 million in governmental activities for the OPEB. You'll learn about the OPEB liability as time goes on. I usually talk about that at this meeting, but that's the unfunded promises that are in the contracts for future health insurance benefits to retirees.
And so just health insurance benefits to retirees, or is it pension?
Nope, pensions separate, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. There was a $795,000 increase to the OPEB liability for the business type activities.
Page 71. Yep. 71 for that.
OPEB.
It's a,
That's accountant lingo.
yeah, yeah.
Other folks in the board
There was a couple of small individual funds that roll up into the general fund that had fund deficits, and the Park Reserve Trust, which I mentioned, had an $813,000 fund deficit. Those are disclosed in the footnotes in the stewardship footnote.
It's on page 56.
Deficit fund
So then
balance right there.
if we talk about the budget now, all the way in the back, what page would that be? In the general fund?
Do you have that? All right, page 80.
This is the budget to actual comparison for the general fund. Revenues fell short of budget by $1 million. However, there was a $1.3 million budgeted expenditures that were not spent, and therefore, the net of the result was a $284,000 positive variance to the budget between the revenues and the expenditures. In the highway funds,
Which is on the next page, 81.
actual revenues were $68,000 in excess of anticipated budgeted revenues, and the expenditures were $553,000 less than budgeted. So the town pretty much performed according to budget in 2016. I will say that this information is not only history at this point, it's ancient history, and we have another year that has elapsed since this. So if we're chosen on as the auditors for 17, we'll review those results. I do not have an indication of what those results amounted to. I will also make unsolicited advice to you on bonding of debt. As outside the scope of my orders, just talking as friends here, the cost of capital is going up. The yield curve is a bit dangerous right now. 10-year bond is at 2.8, a 2-year bond is at 2.3. Although that bond yield curve has steepened a bit in the past week. The back end of the yield curve, which is influenced by an anticipation of inflation, and the front end of the yield curve, which is influenced by the Fed, will likely flatten out and may even invert as the front end of the yield curve gets propped up by Fed adjustments, and inflation being muted will keep the back end of the yield curve down. That generally makes an unfavorable position to borrow funds, because not many people are going to want to sell money at the back end of a long bond when they can get more money at the front end of the yield curve, which is going to create issues in selling bonds. And the town hasn't bonded in a while, and it hasn't spent money on capital projects. But again, that's a little unsolicited, friendly advice. We've seen situations like this in the past, and it does not lend itself to a favorable lending environment. So you should definitely keep your finger on the pulse of that.
Now, how long have you guys been doing the audit here for now?
Our first audit under Supervisor Cardinal was 2007.
2007, and since 2007, we bonded, 8 we bonded, but we really haven't bonded much since then at all.
There was some in the beginning.
We did.
2008, they bond?
There was a 2008 bond, there was a 2011 bond, a 2011 refunding of older bonds, and then we just had a 2016 bond for the sewer district.
But not for general, nothing in general?
I think the 2008 may have had some general fund and CPF money in there. That was the last time we bonded anything for the general fund.
So over the years, we haven't put anything into our capital projects?
No, there was very little capital projects going on in the past couple of years.
But generally, it's advisable that you do bits of capital project each year to be able to maintain your infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a legislative decision, but
Yeah.
of course,
The capital
Usually
projects that
best practice?
correct.
the capital projects that we've done have been in the highway department for the most part, and the general fund has been operating at a $4 million deficit since 2008, 2009, so borrowing money when you're operating at a deficit is not advisable by the auditors.
Well, I think for capital projects, though, for capital project bonding usually takes place each year because it comes off on the back end as you're going through to keep
We've
the
been
infrastructure
paying
up.
cash as we go when we needed
Pretty
infrastructure
much.
improvements
That's exactly what's been going on.
instead of borrowing.
Yeah. Interest rates are still historically low.
What are they now for like the 20?
For a 30-year bond?
Yeah.
Bill, do you know what a 30-year bond is?
I'm not sure.
All right.
It's still a favorable environment, and it, not,
I know we still have a couple that we could roll together and
Yeah.
go out and lower.
yep.
That wasn't done. I know they were advised to do it a couple years ago, and they didn't do that. But there's a couple outstanding for that.
We did refinance our bonds, and we actually saved quite a bit of money on the interest
No,
rate.
CMA, I guess, presented 2 years ago, and they had recommended to roll some together and to rebond them out because the interest rate.
That was
Was
when
not
we
done.
were getting legislation for CPF funds, and we could not actually extend those bonds beyond the life of 2030 at the time, until that legislation was passed. By the time that happened, a lot of our savings went away in the CPF, so we were waiting for those savings to come back. since then, we met
But
with
there were,
CMA.
but even at that time, there were some non-CPF funds that were recommended to
Right.
go out.
Yeah,
which
but
they
there's
didn't.
a cost to bond.
Yeah.
So it was a matter of whether we should wait, once we refunded it, you can't refund it again, so there's a cost to that. So we were
I
waiting.
think we refunded, what year was that?
What's that? The last time we refunded was 11.
Yeah.
But we were discussing doing that in 2016.
Right.
And we had to wait for CPF legislation. Once we did that, the savings was not as significant, so we were waiting until rate went down and we were able to save, enough money to go out and bond. In the meantime, there's been other bonds that are now eligible to refund, so we're gonna
But they've
address
been,
that
they've
again.
been eligible for a while to refund.
Right, so now we have to address that again and see where we are. So now we do have some savings. So it looks like this year we're potentially going to go out and borrow the money for the water district projects we have. And then in addition to that, possibly refund some of the CPF. And there are some general fund bonds that can be refunded. Most of the savings would be in CPF though.
Right, so if there was a cost saving recommended in 2016 for us to refund the bonds, then of course we would have done it, right?
And
No,
they-
there was strong recommendations, it just wasn't, they chose not to do it, but there was cost savings involved in it.
I don't recall someone coming to us at a work session and telling us that they strongly advise us to refund these
CMA,
bonds.
CMA did.
CMA came to us in
Yep.
2016, Bill?
We actually, the recommendations had come prior to CMA based on the interest rates before the legislation. We waited for the legislation, that's when we hired CMA. CMA went back and did a 5-year study and everything else to
Right.
help us with our bond rating. In that time period, the rates had gone up and we didn't have the same savings that we had prior to that. It was all a matter of timing. If we would have bonded in September of 2016, we would have had significant savings. We could have after the legislation in November. By that time, the savings weren't what they were before, and we decided to wait to see if we had more savings. And since then, we've had more bonds that are eligible.
So
we
can
met
you
with-
tell me when CMA came to us at a work session after November of 2016, telling us that we should refund those bonds?
I
I don't recall
remember.
that.
When they presented the first time, when they were doing the RFPs, when they came in. You
I-
had CMA and you had, what's the name of the other
We
company
had two
that does
companies
the
that
bond
came
rating?
in and.
Munich,
we
Munich
had-
came in, who was your previous bond person. They both came in and presented, and during that presentation, it was a recommendation to refinance some of the bonds.
Who did they represent to, or present to? Did they present to
At a
the?
work session, Muni and CMA came and presented.
We had about 4 financial advisors, if I remember correctly.
We did, and we were looking at doing a 5-year plan, and we were looking at the companies that would be most eligible in preparing that 5-year plan. But there were never any recommendations at that time for us to go out and refund the bonds at a cost saving, otherwise we would have. But I'd like to see the tape of when they came in for the work session and said that we recommend that you refund these bonds, where we said, no, we're not doing it. So if you could please figure out what that date was when they came in and made that recommendation, I'd like to go back and look at the work session tape.
I'll go back and look at that for you.
Well, back to the original question. Do you recommend that we do capital improvements over time? And I know you deal with other municipalities.
I can tell you what other municipalities do. The recommendation is outside the scope of the audit, but the town has taken the position that they generally will pay out of pocket for the capital projects in the past. And I would suggest that you talk to fiscal advisors on that, but it's generally advisable to spread your capital projects out, either spread your capital projects out by paying for it with a bond, or with operating transfers from the operating funds, and fund them that way.
So that you're not suddenly playing catch-up on all your capital improvements that need to be done, I would assume.
Correct.
And then the bonds roll off consistently at the back end.
Yeah, the idea is that the cost of the improvements match the taxpayers that are gonna be benefiting from those improvements.
Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we have a couple other things to review. I'll turn it over to Renee to go over the next report.
Sure. So the next report is the
down report that starts with independent auditors report on internal control.
How we doing? We passing with flying colors now?
Getting better,
Yes.
getting better.
Getting better.
Yeah, we've sat here in the past and for a long time, going through a lot of comments. And the comments are definitely
Down to one page?
They're down to a few pages anyway.
Okay.
No pages is best.
No pages is
One
best.
minor comment is best.
That's our goal.
So on pages 1 and 2 is the independent auditors report on the internal control over financial reporting and compliance. The town was not required to have a single audit report this year. Normally, this would be included in a single audit. A single audit's necessary if you expend more than $750,000 of federal funding in any given year. So the town did not do that, so we are now left with this, what's called a yellow book report. It's a report that there is no opinion given, but in conjunction with audit procedures that we have performed, we found certain things, certain what we call findings, significant deficiencies, material weaknesses that we found in conjunction again with the audit procedures that we are required to report to you as those charged with governance.
And are those carries over from previous years?
Yeah, some of them are.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
If you could just tell me which ones are carried over, that would be
Absolutely,
great.
absolutely. So this report contains, like I said, material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, and one item of non-compliance with rules and regulations, so we'll go through that. On page 3 is the first finding. It's related to the town's software. We've been talking about this since we came on as auditors in 2007, so this is a repeat
To
finding.
get off the Cobalt system and to get some financial software
You
that
have
would.
been listening, yes.
We have been listening, but
Excellent.
it came at an expense of, I think,
Absolutely.
$350,000 or $400,000, which would have been a tremendous tax increase to the taxpayers. And when we were operating at a deficit, it was difficult to do.
But I think the Edmund system does address this quite
Yes.
efficiently, and
Yes.
we haven't changed that system, so there is something in place
This
to address this issue without having
Yes.
to.
Right.
Yes, and just
The
to,
days of the flashing cursor are about to end.
the dot matrix.
That's a matrix.
but you make an excellent point. Just a reminder that at the end of our findings, you'll see on the bottom, we do have the reviews of the responsible officials. So Bill and his team have provided essentially a corrective action plan. So our finding is listed, and then management's plan of attack is listed as well, so keep that in mind. And yes, I know that, again, we're looking at, as of December 31st, 16, now here we are, and there's been significant progress on this.
Yes, and we've done a little bit every single year, such as the switches and other components of the infrastructure of the computer software, or the computer system, so that we could take on this software. Because as our system was, when I first took office, it couldn't handle this admin system. So we've spent, I think, $150,000 or more on switches over the last couple of years, and just to be able to take this new software program in.
But that's the updating, keeping the infrastructure updated.
Yeah, we've done it.
Absolutely. Okay, on page 4, interfund receivable and payables. This is also something we've noted in the past. General municipal law requires that any borrowings between funds be paid off at the end of fiscal year. It is very hard to do this, to repay these always by year end, but unfortunately is something that general municipal law requires. So we're just noting here that the town is not liquidating these essentially due froms by year end as required. And as alluded to earlier, sometimes this is a function of cash flow as well, as if you have to borrow, one fund is flush and the other's not, you're borrowing to do certain things that need to be done. If a bond came in or a grant came in, those could be repaid.
And it also should be noted that tremendous progress has been made on this front. When we first came here, there was 8 digits in the interfund receivables and payables. You know, now they're down to a significantly smaller amount that is a result of some year-end adjustments that are made between funds by virtue of journal entries, and therefore the cash can't settle by the end of the year.
And I think it took, when we first took office in 2010, it took you 3 years of having one of your staff employees in the accounting office, 3 to 5 days a week to make all these journal entries in order for you to be able to do our audits, to catch us up for
Right.
2007, 2008, 2009, and 10.
Yeah.
So we had 4 years of not being audited because of all of the fund transfers that the journal entries needed to be made before
Right.
you could even audit the
Correct.
books for those 4 years.
Correct.
Okay, on page 5, the top, the fund balance policy. The town has a fund balance policy whereby the general fund's total fund balance should be no less than 15% of the operating budget. The town's fund balance, again, at 12/31/16, was 2.4 million, which was only about 5.3% of the total operating budget. Therefore, the town was not in compliance with this board-adopted policy. Again, this is, the town's hands are tied, not bonding, not having the cash flow. Things like the property tax cap coming into effect are all things that make this a difficult goal, but we do have to report it because it is a town board
Sure.
policy.
Yeah, the fund balance policy is, it is a policy, it's not a local law. But I can tell you that the bonding community does like to see fund balance policies. It shows that the town board has got its eye on keeping a significant amount, like a sufficient amount of fund balance available. And with the 13-18 tax cap pushing down, and you're operating in a much narrower base because you have the town board's desire to maintain 15% of fund balance in an environment where the property taxes are limited by law unless overridden by this board. So it makes a narrow band with which you can operate fiscally.
And typically, is 15% a common number for most towns?
I can tell you my own opinion on that. My own opinion is that the state controller will generally criticize less fund balance, less than 5 or 10%, and he will also criticize if you have fund balance in excess of
15?
well, no, maybe 20 or 25.
Okay. So, but 10 would be
10 to 20 is
10 to
the
20.
range that I generally, I hate to say I like to see, but it's the range that I think is
optimal to maintain,
Provides-
to have your provisions in case necessary.
correct. It provides enough cushion should things happen, they do, that are outside the capacity to bond, and you have to pay out of fund balance. It provides a little bit of cushion there, if you will, without overburdening taxpayers by keeping 30% of fund balance of expenditures in fund balances. The state controller will generally, criticize you for overtaxing and hoarding.
We
And I
wouldn't
think
know
that-
about that.
Yeah, that hasn't been our problem.
I think that was one of the deficiencies in one of your audit reports, is that we didn't have a fund balance policy, which is why we adopted one
Yes.
based on your recommendation and the
Sorry.
amount that we should try and get to. So that was one of the things that
Yeah, well, the
shortened our
bonding,
pages.
the bonding community does like fund balance policies. I mean, that's something that they look very favorably on. So I'm glad that you have it. Now it's
Time to take a look at
time
it.
to work on it, yeah. So those were all repeat findings. Now we'll go to some new findings.
These are the new findings this year. Justice Court audit,
Page
which is on
6.
page 6. New York State law requires that on an annual basis, the Justice Court records be looked at least once a year. It can be done internally, or it can be done by an outside certified public accountant. The town did go out and have a certified public accounting firm look at the Justice Court records. However, this report has not been issued at this point in time. There's been a little bit of back and forth. So unfortunately, now that we're in 18, that the town has not met this requirement.
But But we did just finish the internal audit.
That was a, well, there's different, there's the accountant's audit.
Yep.
Which was the draft, it's still in draft form, correct?
Well, he presented last week, so that he was waiting for the presentation to turn from a draft to a final, so it should be final, but I haven't seen
And
it.
that's the 16.
That is
Yep.
actually an agreed upon procedure, it isn't actually the Justice Court audit.
So when do we get the 16 Justice Court final?
That'll be the next thing that AZ discusses.
We have it, we've had it for 2 years.
It'll be a year now, actually a year, so I know.
It's 2 years later, but seems like 2 years.
Yes.
That order was done, it's required to be done by March 1st of every year. So our order procedures were done in those first 60 days of 2017, but then just going back and forth, and then the town brought in another firm to come and look at the procedures of the Justice Court, and I did speak to the partner on that account yesterday, and I also spoke to Roberta, Mike, and Renee, and myself. And as far as we're concerned, we are ready to issue that report. We have been about a year now, ready to issue that report.
Okay.
So we're just waiting for some signatures.
So does that draft need to become finalized for you to issue the
Yes.
report?
Yeah, the agreed upon procedures.
Yeah.
Don Hoffman said that he's waiting for some signatures from some of the justices.
So you said you did complete the report for 2016 in the 60 days required
Yes.
before March of 2017?
Correct.
And you submitted that report to the
No,
No,
we-
can't submit it.
Yeah.
You gave it to the Justice Court for signatures?
Yeah, there's certain bookkeeping or housekeeping, I should say.
Yep.
Documents that needed to be signed, so those are still there waiting to be signed
In the
Right.
Justice Court?
in the Justice Court. I
Okay.
just can't issue my report until I get those required communications back.
Yep.
And I understand that Don Hoffman and Cullen have submitted their required signatures to the justices, and as of yesterday, he says he has not gotten those back yet. So once he issues his report, I can issue mine, and of course, I get the signatures back.
Okay.
So the Justice Court has had those documents waiting for signature since March 1st of 2017, for 2016's?
Since probably February 1st.
Okay,
Since February.
thank you.
Thank you.
On page 7, internal controls over the year-end closing process and management review. As you're aware, the accounting department has underwent a lot of turnover, particularly in the deputy financial administrator position. That position is really key for the review process. And I think it kind of fell off a little bit when we went and came in to do our audit procedures. There were some areas that we noted we were given information that didn't really look like it was given that final review, and it caused some back and forth, and it caused some adjusting journal entries that needed to be made.
Is that when the person that we hired, Bill, didn't pass the civil service test, so we had to get somebody new in to fill that position?
Yes.
So that will happen during that time? Thank you.
So we're just basically reporting here that there were some items related to budget adjustments, some of the year-end audit schedules that we needed to be redone several times, and some items noted when we were looking at account coding that were unfortunately, errors, and we feel that would have been caught had there been a little bit of a better review process. So, as you're aware, there is a new deputy financial administrator, so we're hoping that this will go away.
And with the Edmonton system, that'll help also,
That should.
with the coding.
Yeah.
That should definitely help, and hopefully make things a little bit more automated, so people will have a little bit more time to be reviewing as
Yeah.
well. On page 8, this is our last new finding. This is related to the special trust fund transfer. I know Jeff alluded to that earlier when he was going through the financial statements. There was a particular capital project that there were costs incurred in prior years, and the plan was to go out for bonding. Unfortunately, that bonding authorization expired during 16, so now what happens, somebody has to fund that project. So special trust fund was earmarked to fund that, which created a deficit in that fund. And our recommendation is anytime that you have a deficit, you wanna have some sort of plan as to how you're gonna fund that deficit. So we're recommending that the town come up with a plan to determine the best way to fund that going
Bill,
forward.
was
So
that
if you remember
Rangeville
what
Park?
that was, no, that was the EPCAL, remember the, capital project, the EPCAL, that was a $5 million project back in the day. We had spent about $1 million and change on that.
Was that for the bond anticipation note that was issued in 2009?
No, we never issued bonds on it. So what happened was, in 2005 and 2006, there were 2 bond authorizations in order to fund the whole $5 million project. At one point, when we weren't bonding anymore, doing any more improvements, and we couldn't put lights up there and everything else in the ballpark, we had moved all of the budget to another project, so we couldn't do any more spending, and we needed to pay down the $1 million that were spent that we had not bonded yet.
So
And
out of
when
the
was that?
5 million, only one was,
Only
one
one,
was spent and not bonded out.
and not bonded out.
And that was
And that-
prior
that-
to 2010, yes? The million
Yes,
being
that
spent?
was all prior to 2007.
Okay,
okay.
so the million was spent prior to 2007.
So what happened was, that's where we were going through, and initially we put $100,000 against that, right? We took money from the general fund and paid $100,000 a year. We kinda had that deal that we were gonna pay it off $100,000 at a time until we actually went out and bonded. And then, so what happened in the meantime was, in 2016 was the year those bonds expired. You can only have a bond authorization open for 10 years. Once they expired, we have no legal right to bond it, we lose the revenue.
And the job is already
stream.
done, so you can't.
So now we have to find another way to bond that, another way to fund it, I should say, and it can't be bonds, which would be a transfer from another fund. As Jeff had mentioned before, there's $2.5 million in fund balance in the general fund. Can't take another $1 million out of the general fund to fund that, and there's not enough money in the park and rec fees to do that. So we have to come up with a plan on how we're going to fund that. It's now down to $850,000, because we took $100,000 off of it, and another $50,000, and we don't have $850 in either the park and rec fund or the general fund to move over.
Was the 500, wasn't 500,000 of that million spent in the Henry Pfeiffer Center?
So I'm not sure if it's 500,000, but the discussion was, whatever the value is of that or was put into that was taken from Park and Rec, even though it was a town building,
Right.
not a recreation building.
Right.
And so we were going to offset whatever the amount of expenditures were to build the Henry Pfeiffer Center and pay that from the general fund. And the rest would have been responsibility of the Park and Rec fund. The bottom line is, if the Park and Rec, we can't raise money in the Park and Rec fund. That really just a matter of how many developments are being put in. So you have no control over that. There's not enough funds in there, the backup is the general fund would be responsible for it. So it could be responsible for more than the $400,000 or $500,000 if there's no money in Park and Rec.
So the $1 million was spent prior to 2010, when I took office.
It was
And
prior to
then
2000.
we had to figure out a way to pay it back, and by bonding would have cost more money probably than,
Well, because we haven't bonded anything since then, and the big thing to bonding, for those who don't know, I know everybody here knows, but, you know, we were paying $5.5 million in debt service, back then, and our typical debt service every year should be about $1.5 million to $2 million if we were doing regular capital projects. We would be, as Laura mentioned, we would be taking some off the back end when we went and bonded, new projects, whether it would be for building roofs or whatever else it may be. All that stuff has stopped to try and get this, you know, the annual debt service down. We are taking debt service off of the books every year, but with the 2% cap, that's helping us fund other things. We're not actually going out and bonding that stuff because our fund balance is down to $2 million, so.
and we had incurred additional debt to complete projects such as the landfill, where it was a reclamation project where the money had already been spent, and then it turned into a capping, which ended up costing us another $23 million. I think we had to go out and bond for 23 or 24 million.
That's where the debt was. If you go back to 2000 and you look at the debt service prior to any bonding for the landfill, we average anywhere between $1 million and $1.5 million. Even if in current year dollars, we would be averaging $1.5 million to $2 million, we could not, this general fund could not sustain a $4.5 million debt service every year. That put us in the position we were in. That's why we kept putting capital projects off until we paid that down. In every other fund, we got to the point where we're paying as you go. Even in the general fund, we used to bond for cars and we used to bond for IT, computers and infrastructure.
Highway equipment?
Yeah, so highway is
Yeah,
pay as you go now.
right, understood.
in the general fund, we are on a pay-as-you-go for computer equipment and police vehicles and things of that nature. We
We have a
two-
roof, we
but
have
we-
two
but the-
roofs, we have a boiler, we have a justice court, we have,
And those are
we
the
have,
things.
you know, other buildings that need things.
And so I'm just
Yeah,
giving you-
we have sewer, we have water, so there's, it's,
That's
you
how
know,
we got
it
to
kinda
that
got kicked down the road, but the expense didn't go away.
We could have spent, and
And the
bonded,
problem got
and
bigger.
raised, taxes, but we tried to hold it down.
Well,
We
so-
could have
so the
bonded
debt
and fixed all
service-
the roofs and fixed all the air conditioning and
Well, you
heating
gotta
and
have a roof,
spent,
gotta have a
and raised taxes.
But the expense doesn't go away, that's the point.
Well, we've
The
been
roof
fixing
doesn't
as we
get
go
fixed.
until we're in a better position, and in 2017, we started coming off the landfill debt by about $700,000 a year, and in 2018, we'll come down a little bit more, and as the debt gets reduced, then that's the time. But you don't borrow when you're still operating at a deficit. You don't borrow to pay your mortgage.
But you still have to have heat, and a roof that doesn't leak. That's just, but,
They've been
and
fixing it
we
as
are
we
where
go.
we are now, and we'll
move
go
forward.
forward, yeah.
Okay, so that's all for that report.
We're almost done.
Yes, I promise.
Stay with us a little longer.
We're still with you.
Okay.
That's good.
Sorry, I'd just like to clarify things, because sometimes it can come out and make it sound a lot worse.
Right.
And without knowing the reasons behind the decisions that we were forced to make when the town was in such poor condition as far as our general fund balance and the repairs that needed to be done, and just trying to get away with as minimal as we could to not raise taxes.
Okay, the next thing in your packet should be a letter which starts with "in planning and performing our audit." This is a letter, what we.
One of them, yeah.
This is a letter of what we call control deficiencies, recommendations, but they're much more minor in nature, best practice recommendations. So most of these are repeat from last year. I'm not gonna go through it. I recommend if you do have time to go through it, have any questions, please feel free to reach out
So
to us.
there's three levels of comments. There's control deficiencies, which is this report, and then the other report are reportable conditions, again, material weaknesses in that order. So control deficiency or combination of control deficiencies that are significant, we consider significant deficiencies by our nomenclature that has dictated how we speak. And then a combination of reportable conditions or an individual significant deficiency that's so significant that it could affect the way you operate is material weakness. So those are the three
Categories.
categories of comments.
And last is a letter that starts with, "We have audited the financial statements." This is our required communication letter to those charged with governance, the board, pretty much a summary of what took place during our audit, anything that we think that you need to know. Nothing out of the ordinary here. We talk about the new GASB statements that the town was required to implement and did as required. And there's a list here.
Gatsby's are coming
Bill.
fast and
Oh,
furious
my
at this
God.
point.
Check.
You know, we always say that, you know, Gatsby was almost disbanded. Gatsby is a product of FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board. And back when they, just before they issued GASB 34, which brought about all these two levels of financial statements, they needed, they got slapped by the FASB to start talking, and they haven't stopped yet. So they need to be slapped to start talking.
It's crazy.
Stop the
list.
communication.
I mean, this list is just for this year, forget about next year. We've got like a 10-year plan
We
going
spent a
on.
tremendous amount of time in meetings. Me and two of my other governmental partners have spent no less than 20 hours in meetings in the past 2 months, just deciding how these audits are going to look like going forward. And then the Governmental Quality Control Committee in our firm, which Renee is a critical member of, we go through these GASBs and we prepare white papers and we try and help our clients interpret what's
in them?
coming down the pike, because it's a foreign language to anybody who doesn't live the life. So we hope we're helping our clients with interpretation of these GASBs.
Yes, I have a direct call into members of the GASB, and they dodge my calls half the time at this point,
They
because
see
they're so
the-
tired, and they see our number come
see
up,
the
and they,
434 number
oh,
come
she's
up.
got the number, that's
Funny.
so, yes,
That's good. Keep them on their toes. Yes.
absolutely. We question them every time we can, but it's good. That's how we learn. On the next page, we talk about the significant estimates that affect the financial statements. I know Jeff alluded to a few, the depreciation expense, the claims and judgments, compensated absence, which is basically sick and vacation accruals, the landfill, the estimated post-closure care costs, the net pension liability, which is the town's portion of what's being brought down from the state level, and the post-employment benefits, also known as OPEB, as it was referred to earlier. Those are significant estimates that are affecting the government-wide financial statements, and we talk about the changes and what we do to get comfortable with those estimates. We did not encounter any difficulties when performing the audit. If we did, we would be required to tell you. Anything that we deem material adjustments were booked and are reflected in the town's books and records. Anything that is not considered material was attached here, and Bill in his office and our team agreed that these are not material to the statements as well. As far as we know, there was no opinion shopping, meaning if Bill didn't like something that we were saying, he might go out to another accounting firm and hear something that he wanted to hear. That did not take place. If so, we would be required to again tell you. And all of any audit findings were reported in these reports that were given to you today. And that is about all.
Thank you very much for a very, very
welcome.
thorough
Thank
report.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
When did the GASB come out where we were required to estimate the liability for compensated pensions
Well,
and,
that's a long time, that's,
Pensions or,
oh, yeah, there's two
For-
different
I'm
ones.
sorry.
which one are you,
for the, it was something that
OPEB
just
is
came out a
insurance.
few years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
That was
insurance,
GASB
GASB.
68, yeah, GASB 68.
GASB 68,
Yeah,
that
that
was
took
the,
the liability that's sitting on the books of the state and pushed it down to be represented at pro rata.
so that
Local
pension
level.
liability is
that's
here,
GASB 68.
that's GASB 68. The compensated that you're looking at,
45, right?
Oh, no, that's way back.
OPEB is 45.
OPEB is 45, which is here.
Yeah,
should-
that one came out a few
we
years
should
ago,
know this
right?
stuff.
Compensated, I feel like.
But we do.
was in the
You like,
but don't
you
quote me
gotta.
on that.
Okay.
But compensated's been around for years.
I guess that's gonna
30.
be something that they're gonna be fixing soon
Yeah.
then.
It's in the 30s,
Yeah,
definitely
30s,
before 34, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember much past 34, to be quite honest, 'cause it's been
It's
so
all
many.
blur.
Yeah, it's all blur.
Well, again, thank you very much for
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
guys.
much.
thorough reporting.
Thank you.
And you made the report very exciting.
At least,
That's
I hope
funny.
so.
You
At
know,
least
we
that's
actually
not-
laughed at
Oh, the Swiffer,
This,
the
yeah, the
stormwater.
your stormwater report from Drew.
Oh, that's a tough one.
You're very welcome.
Thanks again.
Thank you. It's good
Yeah,
to
no,
see
Thank you.
Good seeing you guys too.
I got home
Thanks.
5,000.
Did the big order.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Thank you.
And Bill, I think you're back up here for the next, and
you.
and
Thank you.
Judy and Ray, you
Yeah.
wanna? John, do you have just the?
Yeah.
Hello.
Like Evan Dyke.
It's just a.
Oh, yeah.
Who won? Deanne? Colleen?
She won the. Change of scenery.
Mine, the end, 800.
This is a good end of the table.
She's lucky. No, because I do terrible fast.
So we have asked you guys to come because it's been about a year and a half or so for the merger for seniors and recs, for the intergenerational merger that took place. So just, we asked you to come up and just give us some reports off how it's going. We've shared the original, I don't know which one, report or projections and ideas for how the merger would go. And just, we'd like to know how it's going, what the pros are, what the cons are, how you see it moving forward, and basically just how it's working for the community. So,
Well, I could say this, I think at the end of the day, the ground floor, the structure's been done. I think we got that done with the public and somewhat with our staff. But since the beginning, I think there's been some, and I think we mentioned this.
I'm just gonna go back. So the structure, when you say the structure, you're referring to what?
The staff being transferred and put into place. The staff is over at the senior center.
So all the staff's at the senior center?
Yeah, except for the parks crew. They stayed at Stotsky. It's
And
just
now-
two of them.
Okay, so who's the parks crew?
That's Ashley and Jordan. And Jordan, we just hired midway through last year.
Who's replacement?
Replacement for
Who's
Jim
the replacement?
Janasek, yeah,
Okay,
Jim Janasek
okay,
retired.
okay.
Staff.
So that, and then we started the marketing campaign to let the public know where we are. I think in the beginning it was tough, but I think by the end of the year, everybody was going to the senior center. Because in the beginning, a lot of people were still coming to Stotsky, but they're going over there.
So everything, what's at the senior center now that wasn't there previously?
As far as what, staff-wise?
Well, if you merge, so it's the registration now that used to be at Stotsky? And what other things that were at Stotsky were moved over? Just the registration personnel, or?
Yeah, I would say that.
But there were other things too. There were computer software programs that we implemented so that people can go online registrations
No, we
and
never even
other
thought about
cost
that.
savings.
That's a good point, because we merged some of the senior services into RecPro, and RecPro's a great software program, where, registration, online registration, all that, so that was a plus. That was good, Jody, I forgot about that.
So online registration is for the rec programs or some of the senior programs?
Mainly for the rec programs, but we're slowly trying to introduce some of the senior programs. All the senior programs, most of them are free anyway for the seniors.
But so you don't register for them, they're more drop?
They do, but they have to come in for this very special event, but they come in for that.
Okay,
We have to have their signature on file, it's
Okay.
different requirements.
so that hasn't merged online?
No,
Okay,
but the fact that everyone's coming in to register for recreation, get their beach stickers, has definitely given more exposure to what we offer for the seniors.
Higher
in the
profile over there.
community. Yeah, it really has expanded our programs more.
Yeah, that was a good thing. It was almost indirectly that happened, because the exposure brought in the younger seniors, which we were targeting. And when you get in there, you kind of see that, hey, it's not a senior center where they're just, seniors are walking around in their walkers, and it's a
Now
great
it's the
center.
staff that's walking around.
True. But and this is too, in many years that I've been here, and, even sitting in with Judy, I had no idea the services that they do. They do a lot. And I think that the public knowing that has brought them into the senior center, which is a great place to go to, it really is. So we're building it up. But as you guys know, Judy and I clashed on, we had a difference of opinion on philosophies. So that kind of hindered it in the beginning. But since then, we've been working it out, and it starts with us, and
It's a work in progress.
yeah.
so that's kind of like, when you say the philosophies are different, it's the programmatically, or?
I think it's good in a way. We're opposite on how we view it. I'm a business straight type meetings and reports and everything, and Judy is,
We need to provide these services.
well, yeah, I mean, she's,
The end result might be the same, but we get there at different ways.
yeah, and I think that's good. And Judy's very good with the employees, obviously the seniors. So what we just discussed is that we're gonna realign it based on our strengths, as far as what we oversee. Even the staff, and something you mentioned yesterday on our call, it makes sense. So we're gonna do it that way, and I honestly think it's gonna be great. I think it's so far, it's been good, but we haven't even scratched the surface for what we wanted to do.
Can you
And,
share with us what the call was about yesterday and what you're going to be now implementing?
Well, no, the call was just to make sure we have enough to talk about here today. So we met with John, and the supervisor jumped in on the phone. So we were just talking about what we're going to talk about now, just what some of the positives were. We discussed some of the negatives, and we discussed how we're going to be moving forward.
Okay.
Judy,
So.
what about you?
No, if I don't agree with him, then I will
Oh, she'll
definitely
tell me.
chime in.
Yeah, that's
believe
one
me,
thing we're good
okay?
at. She will
All
whip
right,
me
we are in
around, yeah.
agreement. I keep quiet until I don't agree, so.
Personally, we've been very good friends for years, so luckily, it hasn't affected that much. But yeah, she'll tell me, she'll put me in my place, let's put it that way.
We have this, I mean, I see a big difference, and I brought that up yesterday, and even how the staff is responding to everything. And it was tough, and as I tried to explain yesterday, it was tough for my staff because we were across the street for years, and when the concept came about to move us and build a building, I was there with the architect, with the engineer, when the first shovel was put in the ground, and so was my staff. So we all moved over there, and you take ownership. And then, as I said, it's like moving another family under your roof. It was, so it's been a learning experience for everyone. You
Well,
know,
I
there's
think
been
it's always
trials and error.
challenging to meld two
Absolutely.
programs together
Absolutely.
in such a way.
And, you
Bound to
know,
be
a little
challenges.
more than a year has gone by, and I think they're meshing, finally. It took a while, but I think we're getting there, so.
I think you guys had expressed also for using the center for multi-generational programs, which hadn't been happening before.
We're really
and-
hoping to do that on Saturdays right now.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea.
You know, it used to be, there's a stigma that goes with senior centers, and for years it was called the nutrition center, and that had a stigma. So we've worked our way from that title, and now it's a senior center. And again, there's a stigma, because it's only for seniors, but it's not. So we're hoping for Saturdays at least to
Seniors
start.
keep getting younger and younger, in my book.
Exactly.
So I keep getting older and older.
That's right.
And they come in for different reasons then. The younger ones come in for different reasons than the older ones do. But on Saturday, we want to open it as a drop-in center, community center, and have programs for everybody. So that's what we're currently working on, trying to build that, so.
And you do that together between parks and seniors? How does that happen?
Well, I think what we're gonna end up doing is, if we're gonna keep parks where they are and build that up, and then we're gonna keep the rec and seniors where they are, and we're gonna build that up. So I think that dividing it that way it works, because parks is at Stotsky Park, that's their focus, and now the staff in rec and seniors can focus on bringing the programs together, you know, combining, meshing,
I
and
think,
doing more stuff.
yeah.
And how would that Saturday drop-in work as far as staffing? Would it require additional staffing or additional hours for staffing?
We have staff all year working on weekends, and the beauty of it, there's two ways we're looking at it. One is that we have our part-timers and seasonals that can work, but two, we were looking into enhancing the employees, maybe looking into a split work week, maybe a 4-day work week, kind of modernizing things, but we're on the infancy stages with that. But that would bring full-time staff onto the weekend.
They have
I think you're
Without
asked
overtime.
about us looking into flexing schedules.
Yeah.
I think
So
your
that they can
program should
cover.
dictate your staff.
Mhm.
Is that what you're doing? Is that, I think that probably would be having it move forward that way, as opposed to your staff ability dictating your programs.
We want to make the staff happy, but we also don't want to pay overtime, like
Right.
excessive. So the flex concept will satisfy all that.
And
Um,
that's being discussed with the union? Or
Well,
in the
there
contract?
currently is a flex schedule going on in the town, so it's not like it's new.
I know, but that's
But we have-
voluntary and
But
it's-
when we're gonna make it voluntary. If the employees don't wanna do it, then they don't have to do it. But to me, it's like a win-win for everybody. But we have to plan it out first, you know.
Yeah, because the
it-
flex schedules, I think, are for emergency, for like sewer, water, and different.
Not
No,
necessarily.
No, I
Yeah,
think
those
flex-
ones do it,
yeah.
yeah.
I
Who's
think that
flexing?
works well with your program.
Yeah,
Well,
Who's
does the
flexing?
contract say
Just
Monday through
curious.
Friday, or does it say 5 days a week?
What?
accounting flexes.
I don't know. It's a good question.
Because that may be the difference.
We have two people that sit flat.
Lori and,
Yeah.
Terry.
We've expressed it to the employees in meetings, and a few of them have come up to us and said they would really want to do this. So, it's kind of been put on the back burner, but we're discussing to see if it'll work. And I think having full-time staff on weekends would help, just not having the part-timers, so.
We would
but-
only roll it out for Saturdays right now.
Yeah.
Maybe for some families. it
Well,
would
that's what I
be-
said, you work a Tuesday through
Yeah,
Saturday
right.
instead of Monday
Yeah.
through Monday through, Monday through Friday.
People like it,
Some
they
people
say,
might like it.
I also
think
have
they
a,
find people
unpaid
willing to do
Just
social
something.
one, just one person talking.
I
Go.
also have an intern right now, a social work intern, that works Saturday, the Saturday program, so that.
Okay.
You have available office space up there, Ray, at Stotsky, with staff that has moved out?
We actually have one office now that's open. We were actually put the risograph, it was in there. We hated the risograph, so we moved it out. But the other office is occupied by Jordan and Ashley. I have an office, my office is there. And then we have 2 part-timers that come in just a couple days a week that occupy the front.
And they're just parks.
Yeah, but we discussed it more. We opened the building, set hours last year in the summer for beach stickers. But we'd like to open the building a little bit more to the public, for the Wading River residents. They don't have to go all the way to the senior center to register for programs. So we're gonna look into that, to bring in staff. Maybe not the full day, but enough of a day where people have the potential to come over there.
But might you be better off doing online registration and mailing the stickers than having?
Oh, we're doing that.
So, but that's what I'm saying, wouldn't that be the way you would go, encourage more to, if people don't wanna come to the senior center, which we're trying to have them come to, or to mail and, not to staff,
Yeah.
not to up the staff on that, if we're trying to go more.
Yeah, we definitely want to do that. The issue that we're having is that the latest report that I have is 80% of the people come in, 20% do it online. And that is because of our system of charging extra money for credit cards. It's part of the contract that we have, and that's something I want to discuss with the town attorneys. We didn't always do that. We always absorbed it until about 3-4 years ago, where the fee is now pushed onto the customer. So if you're paying for,
What's
$20
for a
program.
beach, what's the hit for a beach sticker?
Well, it's $15 for a resident, and you're gonna pay probably another extra $250 with the online. So, yeah, that's unfortunate, because we were at almost.
3%
I
or
thought so
4%.
too, like
Yeah.
2.85% or something,
Right,
or
so it's
whatever
really
charge.
30 cents, so, it's
Yeah.
just a very, very minimal amount,
I'll have to
so.
look at it. I
yeah,
think they
I
add
think-
$1 to that too, though, so.
But
Let's
you know
find that
what
out.
would be interesting, what I've seen other towns do, is that they have one computer terminal and a kiosk there that they can actually go in and they can do all the registration online, and then print it out, and then just write a check right there, if that's what they choose to do. So rather than staffing it, you could have just a computer terminal there that they can essentially,
Who would operate
sign
the
up
computer
online?
terminal? Well, we'd be there, I guess. We're looking at tablets to do that. We're looking to put all the Rec Pro onto the tablets and mobilizing it to, not only in the buildings, but maybe out to Stotsky Park or into the schools or the gym, and they can register right there too.
yeah, that's a great idea. I remember you mentioning that. So if there was like a week where Wading River could sign up for all their programs after the fall brochure comes out or the summer brochure goes out, and then you could have people there with tablets where they could sign up if they didn't want to do it online. A lot of people don't even like putting their credit card number in online.
I was surprised. We were at like a 60-40,
Maybe they
now
wanna
at
come see
80-20.
it. Well, so then have that be a goal for this year, try and get it down to whatever, 60-40, and without putting another person in the other building, and, that's part of this merger, how to improve things. So if we know we're 80-20, to come up with a plan to make it either 60-40 for the
Yeah.
upcoming year, and so that, as we move along, we know what's going on.
Even if you discounted the program just by getting them acclimated to the online
You
sign
always
up.
have that percentage, though, that would never trust the online, as was just said.
Yep.
And they definitely want to come in and they want to talk to a person.
The baby
So we
boomer
always have that
generation will never do
percentage.
that.
For that, right? For those people, I agree with Laura.
We'll never do what?
They don't like the online. All right, maybe
I'm
put
baby
50,
boomer.
60.
Definitely.
Say it's baby boomers per se.
And I just, and I
Watch it now, Ray.
know that
I know, I should've
mentioned
said
this, the other day, but just the organizational chart from what was originally proposed, how, are we still in that same chart? Are we still going that same direction? Just, you know, a year and a half later, how's that working out? Because I
That's
know.
where you wanna see one chart, and you haven't seen that yet, because we haven't done it yet.
Right,
But
so
we will be
if you could
discussing it.
work on that.
Right.
And the other thing I just, and I know I had mentioned to you the other day, and I know, but Judy, your title is director. So my personal thing is that if Judy is the director and that's her title, then I don't, unless somebody is at the same level as Judy, I don't think they should be called director. Because you have a parks director, and then you have the director of the senior services. If they're not equal job descriptions, I think that they shouldn't have the same title.
Well, I mean, that's not really their direct title, they have a civil service title, that's just my verbiage with them.
But I
But I
think
can
for the,
change the
I
verbiage,
think,
that's
for
fine.
the public also, I think, you know, Judy has the director of senior services, and I think with that comes, you know, a certain job description, or a certain amount of years she's put in, or a certain amount of prestige, and I think that to have that title with somebody else that is not at that level, I don't know that that's.
We're also talking about two different divisions, you have parks and seniors, or we can just enhance Judy's title, give
I
her more
just-
money.
I just don't,
I don't know the
this,
title.
but the parks director is really, it's a coordinator, it's an assistant coordinator position, correct?
I wouldn't well, it's civil service defined, yeah, but I wouldn't define it that way.
But
I'm fine,
I don't
that's
know that I'd
fine, you
go
wanna
up to
talk about verbiage, I'll
Seems
change
like
the
a pretty
verbiage.
easy
Yeah.
change. Seems
Yeah,
like an
that's not a
easy
big
change.
deal.
I think we can get that one.
Who do you have labeled as park director, right?
No, Ashley, we
Yes.
put Ashley's in charge, Jim Janasek was always in charge of the parks, and the parks are a lot, they're a
I'm
lot.
not, I'm not
And-
saying that it's
But
not a lot,
Ashley's civil
but-
service title, isn't she?
Her civil cert is, recreation program
Assistant
for.
program coordinator or
yeah.
something like that?
It has that verbiage in there for parks, but for me, she's running the parks for me, so, that's
Well,
why I
then you and
said that.
Judy need to discuss that internally
Well,
and,
she would have-
and figure out what the language is, but I think it should be respectful of people's positions,
Civil
that's my.
service put certain titles under each department, and that's where mine came from, and where the potential for his is, but it's not there yet. She hasn't taken the test, so.
I'm sorry, I was just
Civil
trying to
ser-
understand,
becomes a
Laura,
civil
what you were
service matter.
talking about, but I agree with you. If she's a civil service employee and her just job title is parks coordinator, then that's how she should be listed.
I don't mind changing verbiage, guys, not a big deal.
Okay,
Great.
All right, we're over that one, let's move on.
and then also, I have a couple other questions, I know that, part of the 5-year plan was the budget rollout. So, has this been revisited? Because I know overall, when this first happened, that there was going to be, by the year 2020, there would be a $1.1 million year savings.
Estimated 1.1 million, but
Well, we'll say estimated, but for the estimated savings, we're not realizing year to year as we move along, the savings that were predicted, so,
well, I wouldn't say that, because year
Well-
one, I said between 50 and 85.
are we talking year 16?
What?
Year 16, 2016?
Whatever the
That
first
would
year
have been
was.
the first year.
Right, so the predicted was 82,000, and what did we realize on that
Well,
year?
the
John?
2016 savings was 25,841, and then we
Wait a
added
second, the 16 savings was what is, which,
Well, it says it right there, 25,841, but
I
then we
have
added revenue
projected-
into it, 82,441 with that. Anyway, what was it, Bill?
I don't, I have the budget from.
oh, I see your savings, yes, 25, okay. And then but in year 17 would be 95,000.
Correct.
I don't know that that's the
We
same.
didn't hit that number, no, we're at, according to my records, and Bill and I talked about it and confirmed, it was about $50,000 we saved.
And then projected for this year, we have a savings of supposedly 227,000, and I think from the way the budget looks, it's about a 50,000.
Yeah, to be honest with you, and I said this yesterday on the phone, I still will stand by my numbers, because I think a lot of it's gonna happen on the back end.
Well, but happening on the back end is not really, for 5 years out, you think you're still gonna hit $1 million?
I think we
Mark?
will come in the vicinity of that.
And can you explain that?
I
Wait,
thi- you gotta-
I have a question. So there were anticipated savings and there were also unanticipated expenditures in order to streamline the programs and to save the money on the end. So as far as the computer software and the telephone systems and the tablets and other things that these expenses came up front, but will be a savings in the long run because you don't have to purchase them at a
Correct.
later date. It's a
Yeah.
one-time purchase, so.
But that should have been figured into the budget, because that was all part of this.
I
This was
agree.
all part of
I
this
agree.
projected, was to do the savings with some computer stuff, with some marketing stuff, with the website. I'm assuming that those were included into the budget when it was first put out. And I'm not saying you have to be
There's still
spot
savings,
on.
but maybe not as much as he anticipated up front.
Correct.
There still
That's-
is a savings
And
from
just-
year to year.
And just like we said before, we've hit a roadblock in the first year and a half that, I think inhibited some of the revenue, and now that we're getting back on track, I think it'll get back. I'm not gonna sit there and say, I'm not, the numbers to me were genuine, and I'm gonna do my best with Judy to make sure they hit the numbers.
But you're in charge of the budget for your department, correct?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you wanted to make some changes, you said this was the projected budget and this was what was gonna happen with these changes. So if you don't feel that's going to occur, do you wanna amend this budget and bring it back to us for the merger?
I
Because,
can.
because if you don't think these numbers are gonna work, I mean,
No,
then.
I think that they're just scrambled in a different direction. I mean, the first couple of years, we were not, I mean, we anticipate some retirement that probably won't happen until year 5 now. So that's gotta be brought into it too. Some of the revenue that I had in there, we haven't started the revenue because we haven't fully been structured yet, so.
But like, what kind of revenue was that?
What's said there?
I know, but just give me an example, please.
Well, let's look at it.
What says where, on what page?
Yeah, can you tell
Any
us
of the shaded, is the revenue side, the shaded in
Okay, give me a
tan.
year.
Well, look, just look at 2016? We're
Oh,
looking.
this is,
Uh-huh.
do you have this, the 40-page plan, is that one you're looking at?
I have some.
So, none of us are
you don't-
looking-
You don't have color coded?
We don't
None of us have that same sheet.
Underneath the savings, you'll see projected building revenue, projected 12% supplies reduction, eliminate multiple part-time positions, projected realignment number 3.
Okay, so there we go. So projected building revenue, how is that supposed to be revenue?
We want to rent the building out,
Which building?
the senior center building out to.
But is that even a possibility, Judy, with what you have going on there, to rent that building out?
We
On the
do rent,
weekends.
we always have rented it out for parties on the weekends.
And so do we make about 40,000 a year on that?
Not at this point.
But if you're gonna run a senior program on Saturdays, that will no longer be a projected revenue?
Well, it'll be
and-
available in the evenings.
Okay. But what do you think our estimate would be for about
I
that?
really want to look that over again, Laura, before
Okay.
giving you an answer.
Okay. And then for projected 12% supply reduction, what is that from?
Combining the two departments and the supplies budget and sharing the material together.
So
That
has
should
that,
reduce it.
has that been realized?
Not 100% yet, no, because we haven't aligned it like we should have.
So I guess what,
We have fully completed one full year, and I think we haven't had time to sit down and go
Yeah.
over these numbers.
okay, so
and
this is
reassess
just,
it. I
so
think
I'm
that
just,
needs to be
so,
done.
but I'll ask the questions, and then you guys will have time to take a, so the estimated multiple part-time positions, that was quite a savings. What is that in reference to?
Some of it we already did because we, like the youth program person that became full-time, she was 10,000 alone every year. And then other positions that.
But you eliminated one, but then you put her into something else? Was it a position that was there
That
previously?
was all part of the plan because people had retired and we put her into that position.
Yes.
We accessed a lot of positions, so we
There
are
were-
working
there were-
more with less.
There were several people that had retired, and so you took
Yeah.
the part-time salaries and you put them into the full-time positions that were at a lower pay rate than the people that had retired.
Yeah, that's another thing too.
So these are things that you need to look at, because that was all part of the plan. When you came in and you said, these people are retiring, this is what their salaries are, these people are already here, we're gonna increase them, which we did in the seniors, and we did in recreation. And so we need to see that analysis also, because I think that's where the biggest cost savings were. I think there was like $60,000 in the first year in cost savings in those salaries, so I don't see that in here.
Well, we'll redo it if you want us to redo it, but the bottom line is we are saving money and increasing services. And like I said, I'm not gonna say, oh, well, we're gonna take in half of what I said. No, we're gonna push to get to that number.
Well, I mean, you have a projected budget here, you know, you have what you thought would happen. I'd like to see what happened, you know, as far as these numbers go, where you were able to reach these numbers or not reach these numbers. And then projecting forward for the next couple years, you know,
Yeah, we're gonna do that
if you
anyway.
can reach the
because-
numbers or not, because I think part of the savings was also to be able to enhance the department itself, whether it was different things for the parks, different programs we would be offering, different infrastructure we would be building, and if we're not realizing the savings, then that also enhances our ability to accomplish those goals also. So you know, the question is, are we going to be able to align that, and if not, you know, we need to, as we move forward with our budgets, we need to be able to know that.
After a year into it, you might wanna reevaluate.
Yeah, no, we were definitely doing that.
It's not heading in that direction from what we can see, so I think you just might wanna take another look at that, a hard look at that.
Yeah, we would do that anyway. I mean, I just don't wanna sit there and say we're gonna give up on what we said we were gonna do.
I don't think
No,
that's a
no,
question at all, I
that's-
think we're here to support what you're doing, and support it wholeheartedly, and that's why this conversation is important to have. You know, if we wanna stay on track with what we said we're gonna do, we need to constantly be reevaluating to make sure that we're meeting our goals and meeting our marks and meeting our ability to do what we, you know, are hoping to do in the future.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I honestly think, I think we hit a roadblock that was not, you know, we didn't see it coming. And we've adjusted to that, and now we're putting everything back on track, and so, yeah, we're obviously gonna redo this.
Together.
but I'm still,
Together, right? Together.
why wouldn't we do it?
So,
I think in the end is, what we want to show is that we have expanded the programs, that we're doing more for the community, and the bottom line doesn't need to be $1 million, but you don't want it to go in the negative, and basically that should be the goal.
and we, you know, I mean, you've said, I mean, you wanna improve the Parks Department, you wanna improve the Rec Department, the senior services, and to do that, we need to have a realistic, you know, idea of what the budget is, what the revenue is, what the expenses are, what the salaries are, and what it is that we wanna achieve, so.
So we'll see you guys back again.
Yep.
Yeah, and
We'll see
I
you
even
again.
said that, I think
Stay
this is not the
tuned.
best time to celebrate
Stay
it.
tuned.
I think in another 6 months, we can really tell you exactly the direction.
Good,
we're
that would
going.
be fantastic, I'm glad to hear that.
So the roadblock was the communication, is that what you're saying, was the roadblock as to why you weren't, we
There's
didn't meet
always
the
Yeah, it was
deadline?
unanticipated things that come up when you
Yeah.
try something new. And, you know, we've been not always really smooth, there's gonna be bumps in a lot of different things, and then expenditures that you didn't forecast, and so on, so.
Yeah, and
now
plus,
it's time to analyze it all.
Very good, thank you.
All right, good. So we'll see you back.
Thank you guys for coming to
Thank you
share all
both.
this, appreciate it.
Nice to see you guys.
Okay.
yeah.
Don't drink coffee again unless you.
Yep, so, can I have a first and second to go into executive session for a personnel item, wastewater plant operator, litigation, pending litigation in the matter of Oak Hills Association, pending litigation in the matter of 906 and 916 East Main Street, discussing settlement proposals, and a pending litigation in the matter of the town of Riverhead versus Plaza Auto.
I think this gentleman has a
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry.
Listening to this, what is the town, how are they researching energy problems in town?
As
Consumption of gas, consumption of electricity.
There is nothing on board at this point to evaluate everything, but it's not something that it's something we realize we need to look into.
Doesn't that seem like a very important issue? Because besides for personnel, energy consumption makes up a large portion of the business.
You're absolutely,
And some of the things can be done really easily, like you could put an RFP out for gas, natural gas, right? And you could reduce overnight the cost of gas by 18–20%. You know, solar panels, wind turbines.
well, I think that's part of what we've discussed a little bit about doing an energy performance report, because we do have quite a few buildings, and then between sewer and water and everybody else, we do use a lot of energy. So that is definitely something that we need to look into. but we don't have an RFP or anything out right now.
One of the things that the town can do is they could put small micro CHPs at certain buildings. Right, a micro CHP, let's say a 10 kilowatt micro CHP.
What is that? I don't know.
Micro CHP?
Yeah,
It's a miniature combined heating and power plant.
okay,
Every hour it produces 10 kilowatts. At the cost of 19 cents a kilowatt, that's north of $20,000 a year. The gas company reduces the cost of gas to run that 40%. That in itself is a major savings. And is there some upfront cost? Yeah. But you can't think short term, you gotta think long term. But there could be some real improvements made.
I don't disagree with you. I totally agree with you. You know, I'm just in here about a month and a half. It's definitely on my radar.
By the way, looking
I mean,
long-term is a
we're,
theme.
yeah.
It's a theme we keep coming.
And said, do an RFP for natural gas, nothing ever happened.
We,
I can't speak to the past, but moving forward, it is not something that will be ignored.
We had put out an RFP for solar on the landfill and to realize savings from that by putting it into the transmissions lines, and the transmissions lines weren't adequate enough to carry the power, number one. Number two, we had looked at natural gas in several of our locations, but there's no natural gas in the street, so it would have been a major infrastructure cost in order to bring the gas lines down to our buildings.
That's a selective response. There are lots of buildings that do have natural gas, and you don't need transmission lines. You install peaker plants. A peaker plant is a small energy plant that services the unit and then sends back to the company and you get a credit.
Right. We put out an RFP for a peaker plant at EPCAL. And for a battery cell storage.
I never saw it.
Yeah, we did. I can show it to you. Emery Prudenti in the town attorney's office can give you a copy of it.
Sure, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
If you want to give me your name and phone number, I'll have her send it to you.